I'd like to give the conversation over to Susan in a minute because she's here, and I'm glad that we have the GIA here as well. And I don't want to denigrate any of the other experts. Quite a few experts here. Wow. And I know Cecilia wants to go soon or something, and everybody's got their big things going. But what I did want to say is I remember sitting there with Richard Lidicott, and I actually did a video with him. Sorry I don't have the opportunity to show that video today. We really have to get that back, and I have to find my version of it. And I asked him, I said, well, why did you guys start with the letter D? And he said to me, you know, well, everyone was using A, and we figured with the letter D, no one would be using this letter except internally within the industry to describe color. So they literally pegged that for a very specific purpose, to be able to communicate within our community what the quality of a diamond was honestly, without any influence coming from any of the marketing or any of the misrepresentation. And that's what the GIA's essence of naming the system was about. Now, I think that the GIA is very happy to have other people have laboratories. I think that competition is good for business. I think the GIA, well, Susan can speak for the GIA, is comfortable with it. And I think that the mission that we all have here, not just one lab to make more money or not, the mission that we all have is to see to it that we have an honest industry with tremendous amount of integrity so that our consumers and our customers can all trust us. With that, I would like to ask Susan to come up to her presentation, and then we'll have a lot of questions and answers and discussions. Oh, we should clap. He's not shy.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here this morning, and we are, I'm honored to be with these distinguished folks on the panel here today, and thanks, Martin, for your great presentation this morning. I do have a presentation, if we can quickly pull that up. We're working on it. Okay. The GIA is a very mission-driven organization, and our mission is to ensure the public trust in gems and jewelry by upholding the highest standards of integrity, academics, science, and professionalism through education, research, laboratory services, and instrument development. So when you look at the fact that we are a mission-driven organization, we're not based on profit. The revenues that we generate through our grading laboratory are put back and reinvested through our organization, both in research and in education and in instrument development. So we are a little bit different than the for-profit labs that are in this space, as well as some of the for-profit education. I will tell you that the mission governs absolutely everything that we do. And it is very, very important, and one of the mandates I have for each of our 3,000 staff members is to always think of the mission first. Every decision that you make, how does that impact the consumer confidence in gems and jewelry? And hopefully, by doing that, we will continue to play an important role within the gem and jewelry industry. We look to continue to build our global brand as the world's foremost authority in gemology. Next slide, please. So if we go back historically just a little bit to help you, in 1931, GIA was founded by Robert Shipley, and the reason we were founded was to provide professional education to jewelers. That is the foundation of GIA, and I believe it was 1934, Pete Yancer, that AGS was founded also by Robert Shipley. Now these professional jewelers were getting an education, and the AGS was formed as a guild, an organization that these professional jewelers could belong to continue to promote ethical standards and professionalism within the gem and jewelry industry. So AGS and GIA have been sister companies, sister organizations for many, many years. One of the other things that GIA did was in the 1940s, Shipley developed the 4 C's. And the 4 C's were used initially as part of this teaching tool to combat the proliferation of competing terms, as Martin just talked about. A, AA, AAA, ABC, and the reason D was chosen as the color start was purely because nobody was using D as their top grade. So, it's a pretty simple reason as to why D. Lidicott and Shipley then built what was regarded as the first master stone set and developed the color and clarity scales that we use today and are part of the international diamond grading system. That occurred in the 1950s, and again, it was very much a grading system to teach. It was a grading system for our students. When students left GIA with this education and consulted their instructors when they had a question, is really and truly how the grading actually started as a tool for the trade. Next slide, please. So, GIA today is much more, and I think sometimes we get lumped in with a lot of the other labs, which is great, but GIA is much more than just grading. We have an incredible education facility with actually 9 schools around the world, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We provide education, we provide incredible research, and I'm going to talk more to the research. From our research is where the education continually improves and it becomes updated. We also have instrument development and lab services. All of these support one another and help us to fulfill our mission, and hopefully through our supporting the consumer confidence, we also help to support the trade. We invest our operating surplus back, as I said, into both the research and the education, and reinvesting in our mission to advance gemology and serving the public as well as supporting the trade. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about education, just to give you some idea, we had 15,000 students worldwide last year. 925 GGs graduated from 48 countries, many of them, I hope, are now working for you. Hopefully you're one of them. Hopefully they're working for your suppliers, and hopefully some of them may be your customers. Our education programs are informed by our research, which supports and is supported by our identification and grading services. We also provide many other forms of education that you may or may not be aware of. The Gem Kids program is an incredible program that we provide primarily in our Carlsbad campus, and since the year 2002, we have actually educated 50,000 4 to 6 graders in gemology. These are your future customers. We want them early on to be understanding earth sciences. We are part of the earth sciences curriculum, and every single day during the school year, we have a class that comes on campus and is taught education by our professional instructors, and the excitement of these kids is palpable. So if you ever have a chance to be in Carlsbad, please come visit us. We'd love you to stop in and watch, but this is the most exciting field trip that kids get to do in their annual learning. We also actually now have a van that goes out to schools that are unable to afford coming onto campus with the buses and everything else. So we also provide schools in the local San Diego area. And it's one of the most exciting things, truly, that we do. We've also offered classes in Africa as part of our beneficiation program, and we've offered Gem Kids programs to over 200 classes in Africa. The other thing that we do that many of you may or may not be aware of is we do a tremendous amount of law enforcement training. We have worked actually since 1965, when 6 New York market fraud inspectors enrolled in GIA. But since 2008, we actually work with the FBI, and we hold seminars. The FBI arranges everything and selects all of the attendees. And to date, we have trained 150 various law enforcement officers from local and national agencies in 13 different countries. We also work with law enforcement, and many of you might be aware of this, in helping to recover stolen goods. When stolen goods come through our lab, we are able, through much of the information that we keep on the backside, as do all the other labs, I'm sure, the work information that we garner is not all listed on the grading report, and much of that helps us to identify materials. And we work very, very closely with law enforcement in the recovery of stolen goods and helping to try and get that those goods back to you. We also recently were able to participate in and asked to provide rough diamond training to officials in Côte d'Ivoire. As Côte d'Ivoire was being reinstated into the Kimberley process, they required education to be sure that they were knowledgeable about the products coming through, and GI was asked to provide that education. We also have done customs training for both here in the United States and recently in Dubai for officials, so that they truly understand. With regard to the FBI training, one of the fun things is we teach a lot of undercover agents how to look like they know what they're talking about in the diamond trade, how to use a loop, how to use tweezers, how to fold a stone paper, all the things that we take for granted each and every day. We're able to assist them, and hopefully through this, they are able to continually help to prevent much of the negative side of the gem and jewelry industry and the criminal side of it. Next slide, please. Our research. I think GIA, together with De Beers, probably are the two foremost institutions working hard constantly on research that identifies both synthetics together with treatments, new and advanced treatments that we see. We actually have a dedicated team of 40 full-time researchers. 20 of those have PhDs. They are supplemented and supported by our lab staff, as well as a very prominent consultation team that we have of 6 advisors that work very closely with our researchers. We're very fortunate to have 2 incredible research scientists on our board of governors. Dr. Rod Ewing is a Stanford professor. He is in the Department of Geological and Environmental Sciences and in the School of Earth Sciences. And Dr. John Valley just joined our board a year ago. He's with the University of Wisconsin in the Department of Geoscience, and he is the professor of stable isotope geochemistry and metamorphic petrology. It is really important for GIA to have this type of expertise and stewardship on our board of governors to ensure that we constantly have others looking at the work that we're doing through different lenses, and they are invaluable to helping us as we guide the Institute. We also do a tremendous amount of field research, and many of you may not be aware of the field research that we do primarily in colored stones. We have field research, field researchers on our team based both in Carlsbad and in Bangkok, where we actually visit mines. We visit mines and we collect samples. Now, we don't accept samples from miners. We have to physically dig them from the ground ourselves. We then have GPS coordinates of where that exact piece of material came from, take them back to our labs, we dissect, we do treatments if necessary, we do all sorts of work so that we are building a global database of gems. It helps us in our origin identification to have stones, so we are trying desperately, and we're building this database currently. Ultimately, when this database is completed, we are hoping to make this public to everyone. So we're in the building stages currently, but as a nonprofit, we do hope that we will be able to ultimately share this information. Regarding synthetics and treatments, one of the things I will state to you is our client agreement requires disclosure in writing of any known treatments or synthetics. If you're a client of our lab, you have to disclose in writing to us if you are submitting stones. Are there occasions where individuals put forth a stone because they don't know? Absolutely. Are those folks in any way regarded as doing something untoward? No, they're not. They are utilizing our services to help them determine what it is exactly that they have. The other thing that we do a tremendous amount of information in cut grade. We spent 15 years researching our round cut grade. We've now spent 10 years researching our fancy shape cut grade. And we base everything on science as well as trade opinions, and we've engaged many of you, and I appreciate your time and effort in your engagement in being a part of our cut grade analysis. Pearl treatments, we do a tremendous amount of work on pearls, both natural and cultured. And Gems in Gemology, a remarkable publication that I must say I've tried to keep every copy since the last 30 years that I've acquired. But thanks to technology, each and every one of our 80-plus years of Gems in Gemology is now available free to you on the website. So if you ever have interest in an article or a subject, go on to gia.edu, and the information will be there for you. Next slide, please. Our laboratory is obviously a very important part of the work that GIA does. We ensure the quality assurance standards worldwide through many different processes that we follow each and every day. So instrument calibration, consistent grading conditions, and extensive use of blind control stones done by a trained professional staff. We circulate through our global labs every single day more than 1,500 diamonds that come into the lab that are GIA owned to constantly monitor the quality of the grading that we do. The graders have no idea, because of our random distribution and client anonymity, where these stones are coming from, but is how we can measure. And if we see defects occurring, we are able to identify those early, and we're able to retrain and make the necessary recalibrations. We have 9 labs in Carlsbad, New York, Bangkok, Mumbai, Johannesburg, Gaborone, Hong Kong, Ramat Gan, Tokyo, and an intake facility in Dubai. We see millions of stones each and every year, and this enables our lab and research team to work together to help discover and address issues in the marketplace early. We recently had an example of that. In 1999, undisclosed HPHT stones came through the labs. Yehuda stones came through the labs. I will not tell you that we will be able to catch every single treatment at the early stage. But when the spears start coming back to GIA, I like to equate it to, are the doctors who finally determined the AIDS virus at fault because they didn't know or understand it when they first came across it? There are going to constantly be, there are a lot of people, many motivated by greed in the trade, that are constantly trying to defraud. I'm making no accusations at this time. I want you to understand we are there on the front lines doing our very best every single day through the research that we do, through the millions of stones that we see through the labs, to ensure our number one mission, ensuring the consumer trust in gems and jewelry. That's what we do on a daily basis. So the other word, I would just love to try and retrain the trade, if at all possible, and I know it's challenging because I've already heard it 100 times this morning. We do not issue certificates. We issue grading reports. Please, thank you. All right, next slide, please. Research and instrumentation. Truly, through the history of GIA, our research has helped us develop specialized equipment and instrumentation that it can be used in the gemological field to help solve the challenges that we face. In 1934, we actually invented the modern loop. I hope each and every one of you carries it every day. It is still probably the most important gemological tool that you can carry with you. 1937, the first gemological microscope. I will tell you, we're very excited. We're currently working on a new generation, ergonomically designed microscope that we hope to have to market sometime very soon. 1953, we came about with the International Diamond Grading System. In 1956, we helped to identify the irradiated color enhancement that was coming into the marketplace. In 1999, GIA and De Beers worked together, as we do in collaboration, on many, many different research projects to help identify HPHT treatment. And in 2014, we were actually working internally for use in our labs, and we did avail this to 19 bourses around the world at no cost, the Diamond Check instrument. And the Diamond Check instrument is an off-the-shelf infrared spectrometer that we actually developed a specialized software with an algorithm that looks to separate synthetic, natural, and anything that doesn't fall into those categories for referral. So the research side and the instrumentation side are, again, critical to the work that GIA does on a daily basis. Next slide, please. Sharing the GIA standards. So, anybody that wishes to grade to GIA standards has the ability to do so if they choose. We would ask that if you use the GIA terminology and the GIA scales of color and clarity together with cut, that you use the same parameters, because for consumer confidence, they expect to be comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. So it is imperative that if you use our terminology, you please apply the same standards. What it requires is it does require a very trained and professional grading staff. It does require a controlled environment, investment and calibration in instrumentation, and the assurance of quality benchmarks that have to be looked at each and every day. It is easier than ever to use the scales and grading criteria. Any of you can enroll in our education and learn exactly how we assign color and clarity grading. Any of you are able, hopefully you'll have one of our 100,000 alumni, either working for you, working for your supplier, or working for perhaps your retail store. We can help you assemble master stones. And in the past, we've asked you, send us your stones and we'll help create your master stone. I've been having conversations with Tom Moses recently, and it is challenging, but one of the things we've thought is if we actually made up master stones, we would be more than happy to sell those to anybody in the trade interested in getting them. We still use our base master stone set that was devised many, many years ago, and the master stone sits at the highest end of the color. So there is no D master stone, it begins at E, because anything higher than the highest E is a D. And it goes through the letters about M. Not everybody may need, a retail store may not need to have every stone. You might be able to get away with every other stone. But if that's something of interest, please contact us and we'll be more than happy to discuss that. With respect to weight, obviously, the calibrated instrumentation is readily available, as is the instrumentation for cut. Sarin and many of the other companies produce specialized cut grading instrumentation, and our facet wear, which is how we determine the cut grade, is embedded in there. Next slide, please. So I've already reiterated, I will reiterate once again, if you're using the GI standard, it is essential under the FTC guidelines that if you're using a specific grading scale, that it is deceptive if you identify the grading system not used. So any lab that uses nomenclature from GIA scales must use the same standards. All of the labs have a great niche market. AGS's expertise is in cut grade. IGI meeting the needs of the very large retailers. HRD's aligned with the Antwerp World Diamond Center. De Beers and Forevermark are coming up with the labs supporting their branded products. And as Martin said, GI is not looking to dominate this market. We are looking to have fair competition that is honest and ethical and, again, ensuring the consumer trust. As any of you are aware of some turnaround issues we had a year or so ago because of this sudden amazing influx of goods, there is plenty of work to be done by a lot of talented labs in the industry. So we would just ask, again, that if you please do, as you do your business, that you always, as we do, keep in mind the consumer confidence in the product. Next slide, please. So the end is, again, every decision we make is based on this mission that we have to ensure the public trust. And if I have a fifth C, and we hear it often, the fifth C is consumer confidence. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to quickly introduce the panelists, explain the focus that we want to try and put on this meeting. And then I'd like to call on Cecilia Gardner from the JVC to give a legal view on some of the issues we're discussing, because I know she has another appointment already, I think, and she's over time, and she just wants to give us the benefit of her wisdom before she has to leave. We're discussing grading standards. We're discussing whether there should be a common grading standard when there's a common grading language. We're discussing how grading standards have to meet commercial needs, for example, iClean, SI1, SI2, SI3. Where's the industry going on that? Where do the labs stand on that? We're looking at how do we talk the same language so that we don't end up calling something, I don't know, an apple when it is an orange, to use Susan's example. So who we have on the panel today is Pete Janser and Jason Quick, both from AGS. The reason why we have two AGS members on the panel is Pete's retiring soon after many years of work at the AGS, and Jason will be taking over for his position. So we thought this was a good opportunity anyway to introduce you to Jason. We've got Susan, who you've met, David Lasher representing the trade from the Diamond Dealers Club, but also the WFDB. Mark from GSI, Dries from HRD Antwerp, Jerry from IGI, and somebody whose name I'm afraid didn't make it onto the official list because it was a last-minute addition, is Mr. Mayar. I'm not sure how to say the last name, Bahanju from Venus Jewel. Did I get that close? Okay. From Venus Jewels, representing the manufacturers, the trade, to talk about grading standards and what it means to move it through the whole industry. So at this stage, what I'd like to do is just invite Cecilia to say a few words about whether can we as an industry enforce a single grading standard for the labs, for the good labs, as it were. Martin spoke in his presentation about, let's join the good, and the bad will be kind of left out of the circle. For the labs that want to join the good, can we have a single grading standard? What does that mean, and what kind of mechanisms can be used? So I'm just going to point to Cecilia, and then we'll move on.
I saw downstairs a fellow who's getting around on one of these little segways. Have you seen him? I feel like I should learn how to do that because I have a meeting that I have to leave for. So I do apologize for speaking and then getting up and leaving because, as you know, I'm very happy to answer questions. And I want to start by giving you my email address, which is clg@jbclegal.org. If you have any questions about what I'm about to say, and also my phone number, which is 917-838-14... No, that's my cell. Forget that. It's 212-997-2002. Don't use the cell. Sorry. So the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, of which I am the president and CEO, among many other activities that it does in the industry, is the recipient of complaints from consumers and also from the trade, where companies get into disputes regarding their compliance obligations or when consumers have problems with their purchases. I have to tell you that we do about 400 of these a year. We approach them as mediations. We're trying to get people to come to mutually agreeable solutions to these disputes. A very large percentage of these disputes, both at the trade level and at the consumer level, involve grading reports and the pain of learning that the grading report that you have used in connection with the purchase of your diamond has been issued in a manner that is deceptive about the true quality of the diamond. And I'm not really talking about price here, I'm talking about quality. So we have been very active in this space as the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, trying to explain to the trade what the legal ramifications are of issuing grading reports. And of course, they're governed by law in the sense that if you are a person of expertise issuing an opinion, you are held to a certain standard of responsibility for the opinions that you render. And if those opinions turn out to be deceptive in any way, you can be held liable in a number of ways, including being sued not only by the people that you have harmed, but you expose yourself to class action lawsuits and potential government enforcement action. There is some law on the subject in the form of a Federal Trade Commission guideline, which Susan has already referred to. And in this guideline, what it basically says is that you are, if you're grading diamonds, obliged to disclose the system that you use to grade diamonds. And it must be done in a manner that an ordinary, reasonable reader of your disclosure understands. So a lot of questions have come up recently, given the current controversies about the use of the GIA grading terminology, these letters that were invented so many years ago by Richard Lidicote. And what I'm about to say is a matter of perspective and interpretation of current court rulings and case law. This is not statutory, what I'm about to explain, but it is what I personally, what the JVC believes. You know, we've got 3 lawyers working on these issues in the JVC and making sort of best case conclusions about this. It's our view that the GIA letter grading terminology is an accepted trade practice in our industry. So a court would look at those letters and conclude that yes, these letters are widely used and therefore can be an accepted trade practice. Where one gets into difficulties is if you use those letters, but you implement them in a way that is different from the way they are implemented by GIA. There's no law against you doing so. You can still use the letters, but you have to disclose that you're using them differently. Now, we've heard this morning, Susan, request that if you use the letters, you use them in a manner in the same way that the GIA uses them, and I would endorse such a request. I would approve such a request. I would urge you to do that as a laboratory. However, if you were to ask me under the law, are you required to do that? The answer to me, based on the law, just our JVC's interpretation of the law, it's not just, it's the JVC's interpretation of the law, you could do it as long as you disclosed that you were doing it differently, okay? And in a manner that a reasonable reader could understand, okay? So there isn't any law that prevents you from conducting yourself in that manner. I agree with Susan's request, urge, plea that if you're going to use the letters, you should use them the same way GIA does, but you're not required to do so. So that's my basic presentation today. I have time for a couple of questions, Savile, if it's all right, if I take them now based on what I've just said. Is that okay? He's nodding yes. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this. Unfortunately, the resolution of the cases that we do, especially on the consumer side, when we deal with exaggerated grading reports, is extremely unfortunate for the industry, because even when we resolve these matters, we mediate them to mutual satisfaction. A consumer, having gone through this process, turns to the JVC mediator and says, next time, I'm buying an iPad. So it's very, very harmful to the industry as a whole. So I can take a couple of questions. Yes?
I'm from Canada, and we have a similar organization in Canada that's also called JVC. It's Jewelers Vigilance Canada. Are you in contact with them? Do you guys work together at all?
Yes. We love Jewelers Vigilance Canada, and they love us, and we work very closely together. We are not the same organization. We're not affiliated. We're not partners. We're two separate organizations, but we love each other very much. Absolutely. My phone number is... Pardon?
Cecilia, if someone not using the GIA standard but the GIA nomenclature, how would they identify the fact that theirs is different? Would they have to just say, we're different, or they'd have to say how they were different? And how would they go about doing that?
Right. Thank you. It's a good question, Martin. They have to say how it's different. I have seen laboratories that have said, compared to a GIA letter grade, what we mean by that letter grade is something different, and they sort of compare their charts. I've seen it done that way, and I think that's pretty clear. If they don't disclose the differences in the letters that they use, if they say, we look at diamonds a different way than, I'm not a gemologist, I'm just a lawyer, and so this stuff gets a little past me, but if they look at the diamond from a different angle or they use different instrumentation, maybe they need to say that on their grading reports. So it depends very much on what the lab is doing and how they're going about doing it. But it's not enough to simply say, we use these letters, but we mean something different. You have to go on to explain exactly what you mean when you use these letters.
Does such disclosure have to be like on the invoice or anywhere that they use the GIA?
So the FTC guides do not govern how you make the disclosures that they require. They simply say you must make the disclosure. It has to be clear, it has to be conspicuous, and it has to be in an area that a user of the information would necessarily observe.
There's a question here.
Does it have to be in writing?
I'm a lawyer, so here's my answer to your question. It damn well better be in writing. Okay, I'm going to skedaddle. I'm
Cecilia,
really
thank
sorry.
you very much.
I do apologize.
Yeah. And what Cecilia said about an accepted trade practice is very important because, we run RapNet as well, the Rapaport group, and I often have labs coming up to us and saying, please put our lab on RapNet. We're a good lab. Put our lab on RapNet. I had one the other day come to me and said, you really should put our lab on RapNet. We're a good lab. We used to grade as a matter of policy 4 grades above GIA, but we've got much better. Now we try and do only 2 grades above GIA because we needed to break into the market. Now that we've got a bit of market share, we can sort of. So I said to them, why don't you grade using the same standards? And they said, well, if we do that, where's our competitive advantage? So this idea of accepted trade practice and talking the same language is very important to us. I did want to give a chance to people, maybe I think because of the timing, I'd like to open up to questions if anyone has any general questions, and then I don't want to let Susan wriggle out of the issue of what's happening with no, wriggle out's the wrong word, but I don't want to pass over this issue of what's happening with the treatments that we've been hearing, this temporary treatment of diamonds and what's going on with that. I think we should discuss that. And I would like to focus also on common grading standards and hear from the rest of the panel where we've got other laboratories and where we have members of the trade as well as the manufacturers who have something to say about that. So maybe we should just kick off with the issue of what's going on with the treatments, and then we'll move on to the other members of the panel. Yeah, standards.
I wish I could say that we have absolutely definitively identified at this moment. I can tell you we have not. However, we are exceptionally close. So our researchers have been working day and night for a period of time now in trying to determine, as Tom Moses would say, I know the ingredients, but I don't know the recipe. And so we've worked very, very hard. Our mission is to ensure the public trust. This type of situation does nothing to ensure the public trust. And so the circumstances were such that most of these stones came into a particular lab through our same-day service. We do color grading as one of the first steps within our process, and that is the reason that these stones were able to pass through without identification at the beginning. Phil, do you have anything to add? Phil is our director of the Carlsbad Lab and happy to answer more technical questions than I.
Just a clarification of what you just said. I understand that to mean that you have no trouble identifying the treatment, but you don't know exactly what it is. Is that correct? Identifying meaning, oh, that one's treated.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's what it means. Yes, sir.
On that treatment, there's been a lot of talk on the street in New York that from people who either had stones like this or people who think that they've heard some information. And what I'm hearing from people in New York is this treatment is nothing new. It's something that's been around for a long time, and that quite possibly the graders themselves may not have been actually checking for what was an older process that doesn't come into the lab anymore. So what happens is you get a little lax, because if it's a coating of some type, which was prevalent back in the late 80s to 90s, there was a process that the graders would use to check for this on a daily basis. But if that process is no longer being seen for years and years and years, people tend to not check for this kind of a situation anymore. So that's what's being said on the street in New York.
Obviously, this is part of an ongoing police investigation now, with the Israeli boss bringing the police into it. So I really can't comment on, a lot of the specifics regarding it. But Phil, do you want to answer perhaps that question about older treatments just in general versus newer treatments?
Sure. The training hasn't changed in all the years. I think that there's a lot more involved. I mean, when we're talking coatings, I can't tell you that it's a coating or it's not a coating today. I can tell you, I can just say what Susan said, that we are looking at every option. But referring to coatings, I think back in the day, there weren't the same cleaning protocols in place that we have at the labs today. Today, every diamond, whether it's a 15-pointer or a 500-carat diamond, goes through the same process. Treatment detection goes through the same process of cleaning, goes through all those processes. So there's still ownership on every grader, to look for coatings and things like that, but we've tried to mitigate some of that with the graders by the cleaning processes we have in place today. So I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned about these diamonds is, you know, I would say 15 years ago, if you saw diamonds that were an off color or notated notation saying that they were potentially off color, you know, you'd say, oh, there's a red flag. But, you know, we've all seen rough over the last 10 years that has more of those off colors. So it's not as evident when you see something that doesn't look just right that, oh, it's treated. So, you know, one of the things we have seen is a lot of these stones were off colors, but not all, which again just makes it even more complicated. So I think, as Susan said, we're close. You know, we know the ingredients, but we don't know the recipe.
Good morning, everybody, especially you way out in the back over in the corners. My name is Peter Yancer, and I'm the Executive Director of the AGS Laboratory. I kind of lost track of what the topic is today, but I'm winging it anyway, because that's what I do. But I'll tell you what, everybody in this room, if you weren't really, really impressed by the depth and breadth of what GIA does for our industry, you certainly should be. You know, and I always like to give credit where credit's due, and they certainly deserve a boatload of credit. So, and I want to expand briefly on Shipley's vision. You know, he founded the GIA in '31 and then the American Gem Society in '34. And the reason he founded the American Gem Society was that he saw the need for students, when they graduated from GIA, to network with each other, to continue their education, and to protect their customers. Consumer protection's been a founding tenet of the American Gem Society. And we're fortunate enough today, with a lot of hard work by a lot of really good people, to have a first-tier, top-tier laboratory in the world today with a great reputation. We're a niche laboratory. We are just, you know, well, there's that cool movie coming out, Ant-Man. Have you heard of that movie? Yeah, well, we're like that size, Ant-Man. But we're really good at what we do. Now, to address I know nothing about the treatments to the stones at GIA, were submitted to GIA. But I can tell you that on a bigger picture, were we going to talk about SI3 or what else? Standards. Standards is obviously really, really important. And I can only tell you that from day one at our laboratory, we also have the American Gem Society grading standards that were set up in conjunction with GIA way back in the day. And I'm old enough to use the phrase way back in the day. And our standards, we print our grade, American Gem Society standard grade on it, and we print what we believe to be the equivalent GIA grade on all of our reports. And with respect to our other distinguished panelists, I'll pass.
Okay, my name is Mark Gershberg, and I'm CEO of Gemological Science International. We are one of the largest gemological labs and one of the youngest gemological labs in the industry. We are 10 years old this year. We work very hard to make sure that we adhere to the highest standards in grading, in service, and everything else. We do use GIA grading standards. We do use GIA nomenclature, and we believe that this should be the only scale today accepted. I mean, it shouldn't be the only scale accepted, but I agree with everybody who said before that if you use GIA scale, you have to be using GIA scale not only by name, but by deed. That's it. It's very short. Jerry, you like to talk. Jerry will talk.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. I'm the president of IGI, and we started in 1975. We use the GIA standards, the strict interpretation of those standards. I'd like to say congratulations to GIA for creating the standard. I remember about 35, 40 years ago at a meeting I was with Mr. Lidicote, And he said, yes, we follow the system, and it's great if everybody follows the system. The one thing you can't test and know is the integrity of the graders. There's no way to know if they're coming from a high place or not. And that's it. That's where you go. You have a person who is grading and he's straight. He used the GIA Masters, which we all use, and you don't know if the grader is going to be honest or not. Can't test for it. But it would be best if we all do follow the standard. Ultimately, the consumer, as GIA's mission is to protect the consumer, we also follow that.
Jerry, what do you mean a strict interpretation of GIA standard?
Because of the fact that you're comparing a diamond to a master stone, you know, you either you're honest or you're not honest, and you need your eyes tested every so often. Eyes go as you get older. So
okay. Because I remember in the past we've discussed things like a strict interpretation of GIA standard, where sometimes people think GIA may have moved off their own standard, and you're still following the original strict standard. That's why I'm just asking that.
Exactly. In other words, when you're grading a diamond, you have borderline stones. They get very, very close. So that's where we said before you need an experienced grader that's been doing this for years and years and years. There you go.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Dries from HRD Antwerp. We are, as a European lab, we are not using the GIA standards. We are using the IDC standards, which back in the days, which I cannot say because I was not born yet. In the 70s, you had the ITMA, which is the manufacturing organization on one hand, and the World Federation of Diamond Bourses is creating the IDC and the IDC-related rules. We, as the biggest European lab, still use, until today, these rules. And we are also very clear on it. And there is, however, a link between the standards of IDC and the GIA. Also, the master sets were compared. We still hold we are the safekeeper of the master stone set of the IDC. But it's not only about the grades you need to talk. You also need to talk about the protocol. For example, for the color, do you use the A or do you use the B stand? We, as an HRD, we are always very clear that we only use the A stand. We force our graders to always look in A, because they prefer B. It's easier. I'm not a grader myself, but the graders always tell me, B, it's easier to look. No, we force them to look in A. This also improves the consistency. But then there is also a third thing, is be transparent about what we talked about, the grades, and be transparent about your protocol. And I think we as HRD Antwerp are always very transparent on what are our standards and what are our protocols. So I will invite you also to use our certificate. Thank you.
And I noticed on the HRD report, like on the AGS report, you write your grading, and then you put in parentheses afterwards what the equivalent GIA standard is. Is that a mapping that you have done?
Again, that's what I said earlier. In the 70s, there has been a match between the master stone set of the IDC and GIA, and we still use that master set. And that's okay. We need to be honest. A lot of people use the GIA grading. We have our own, but in terms of helping the customer, we refer to the GIA grade, but the grade we give is our own grade based on the master set, which has been set up in the 70s.
So it's a little bit like Cecilia said, where you actually just disclose your grading standard and you disclose how you're mapping it.
And again, I think it's important to be transparent about the grades you give, the protocol you use, and I think every respectable lab should do that.
Okay. All right, that's where we're up to on the labs, which is the science side. Now we're hitting the industry, which says, okay, it's all very nice, the science. We've got to sell the things, and we have to market them. And sometimes labs have got their own branding, and we need to push these things through. And this is where the kind of rubber hits the road, because this is where the temptation to use softer grades comes in. So I'd like to move on now with David and the DDC. And what's the trade's position on common grading standards?
So good morning, everyone. It's in our mind is, you know, from looking from the top of the industry, especially with thank you, with sitting down with the leaders of the WFDB, the World Federation of Diamond Bourses. It's our opinion that the most important thing that the labs need to do and we need to do in a collaborative process is to protect the reputation of diamonds. And we see as the only way to do that, especially with the recent history in the disparities between the different labs, is make sure that there is a broadly accepted industry benchmark that makes sure that the consumer confidence is there when they're buying diamonds. We have trade rules for inter-dealer relationships, and we have abilities to censure our members if they are deviating and misrepresenting diamonds. And we find that it's vitally, vitally important that when it's going downstream, and it starts with the labs and going through our traders and going ultimately to that end consumer, that they understand what they're getting and that there's no misrepresentation at any point of what is being sold to them.
So, David, before we hit you with the hard questions, let me ask an easier one. What do you know what the WFDB is doing with this discussion of grading standards? Because I also know that they have some initiatives going on there.
The WFDB has been discussing it at our upcoming president's meeting. We're ratifying our official statement on grading standards. I unfortunately can't share the official language yet, but it is very in line with, I think, the sentiment that's being expressed on the panel today.
Okay, so okay, and I appreciate your sentiment on grading standards. Does that mean that in the DDC you may be banning the trading of some certificates, or?
I can't say exactly. It's unlikely we'll ban the trading. However, if there's misrepresentation of diamonds, then we will step in. Within the trade, we have two experts looking at diamonds, and whether or not the grading report is there or not is not always at issue when two traders are trading diamonds. However, if a trader is misrepresenting diamonds to their end user, to the consumer, that becomes a very important issue for us, and obviously action will be taken at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jason Quick, and I also work at AGS Laboratories. Been working with Pete Answer, the rock star, for 10 years now. It's been a great experience. And I would back up everything Pete said. We grade to the AGS grading system, but we adhere to the GI terminology and the standards when we put the GI grade on. Color, clarity. The only thing I would add when it comes to cut, we use the AGS grading system for cut, our light performance system, and that would be the one area we don't use the GI system for cut. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Morning, everyone. Mahia Barhanju from Venus Jewels, Managing Director. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. So we started out in 1997 trying to figure out how do we actually sell our diamonds, because we wanted to be a very simple organization and just manage our business out of India. So we manufacture in Surat and we sell our diamonds out of Mumbai. In 1997, we opted to be the first company to dare go online and sell our diamonds on the internet to the business on a B2B level. And in order to do that, we realized very quickly that we need to utilize the standards that have been set forth by the GIA, but be more detailed around those standards. So we look at not just the 4 Cs, but for example, if a stone is a GVVS1, it could be at the higher end of G, lower end of G, higher end of VVS1, lower end of VVS1. We wanted to provide our customers with as much detail about it and a stone that we're selling to them, so that they would be able to actually really appreciate and understand what they're purchasing without the stone physically being there for them to view in front of them. And we quickly found out that these standards that we're looking at, our customers are questioning, okay, so if I have a GIA VS1 plus, maybe E plus color, potentially, maybe with one of the other grading laboratories, it could be utilized and sent to them and have an upgrade, as it's called. This is the question when we talk about consistency of processes and such. Each laboratory, I believe, has a very good, consistent process that they utilize. I think the industry and the market starts utilizing those consecutive processes that the laboratories have to see how they can actually get the best potential possible. It's no longer called a cert, I apologize. Grading report. Thank you. So I think that's the importance of it, because a consumer who goes out there and buys an EGL, an IGI, a GIA, an HRD stone, they don't know what the difference are in the standards. What they see is someone telling them it's an HVS1, it's a great stone, and if it was by IGI, could it be different than what it is from GIA? We don't know, but the consumer gets confused at the end of the day. What we wanted to do at Venus was to use one standard to provide to our business partners the ability to be able to purchase goods without them having to physically being able to be in, let's say, Mumbai to purchase the stones from us. I think the question that the panel here should really be focusing on is, are we really indeed utilizing the right behaviors for the consumer, who's the end person who puts that stone on the finger of their loved ones or around their necks or ears or many other places these days? Are we actually doing the right thing with the various standards and perhaps interpretations of those standards? With Venus, we're proud to say that we are using and have been using the GIA standards for quite some time. We are much more detailed on the standards than normal. In actuality, we have 110 different permutations of what the stone would actually look like. So that's 110 different combination of things that one can look at, from color, cut, where let's say the pK of a stone is it's dispersed within the stone, in the center, on the bottom, on the top, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That my concern is have we answered that question? It's great that we're all using a standard that follows GIAs, but the consumer sees something different based on how the retail and the industry actually grades the stones. In regards to SI3, I haven't heard anyone really discuss SI3, so I'll be the first to dare try. I think whatever standard we use should be followed no matter what. Now, why did SI3 come up? There's a disparity or a fairly large difference in prices of SI2 versus I1. So you can have a high I1, as they call it, or a low SI2, and the price difference. I actually, Marty, just used your Rapaport online app. So if we look at a D1 carat SI2, the average price is $5,600. If we look at an I1, it's $4,100 per carat. Now, when you look at the highs and the ends of the SI2 and I1, you can have such a big difference in prices. Should we actually have an SI3? And according to this, there is an SI3, at least on the search engine, there is an SI3. I think to be able to actually minimize the number of, or the amount difference or the gap between SI2 and I1, and be more clear on what we mean about a clean I1 or a weak I2, it makes a lot of sense to have something that is defined as an SI3, and that's something that we should look at and perhaps make it a standard rather than a possible standard that people are following within the industry.
Thank you. The SI3 point's an interesting point, because it may be that the gemology is quite correct and that the grading is quite correct, but there's a very big difference in SI2 and the I1 stones, and iClean, which is a commercial need, doesn't really come into the grading. I just wanted to put on the screen quickly a website that's up and out there right now, so that people understand, because I listened to the panel and everyone's singing out of the same hymn book, everyone's saying we all follow GI standards and everybody's wonderful, but there are labs that don't. And right now there's a website out there from some attorney who's saying, was I the victim of diamond fraud, and you could be entitled to a significant compensation. And then when you go down, Ari, if you go down a little bit, further down, it says, whoa, not that far down. Anyway, somewhere along the lines there it says that sometimes there's deliberate overgrading. And then that goes on to say, if you had your diamond graded by any other lab other than GIA, you could be entitled to compensation. That's what they're claiming in this beginnings of a class action lawsuit. And that, you know, we've had these diamond grading conference, I believe we're now in our 6th year, and we've been discussing this for a while, and we've been talking about standards, and we've been talking about the importance of consumer confidence, and the disservice that we do as an industry if we support bad grading and we support bad labs. And we've mentioned a few times over the years that, you know, one day it could result in a class action lawsuit, and all the work that we've done to try and keep the industry good name and try and keep even our stores good name could be undone if this kind of thing. And this is what's starting to happen now. I don't know how, you know, whether this will take off or not, but the bottom line is that if we as an industry don't come together and find a way to force labs to follow a good standard, and if we allow people to call something a D when really it's a K, then we're helping bring down the downfall of the industry. And so the panel here is all saying we follow GA, or if we don't follow GA, like HRD says, we follow our own standards, but we have synthesized with the GA standard in some way. That's good. The GA is the leader and the inventor of the grading standards. The question is, what do we do as an industry when there are labs out there that don't follow those standards? That's the big issue, the burning issue here. And then the second issue, which if we have time, because I see we're rapidly running out of time and I want to open up to questions, is this issue of iClean, this issue of an SI3 grade. Maybe direct the question to the GA, which will probably lead and others will follow. Is GA moving in any kind of direction to talk about? I see a little smile on Phil's face there. We've discussed this a few times. You know, because there's a commercial need out there for it. And if we're going to leave that gap and people start doing their own thing, and we talk about iClean, which isn't really well defined, we're going to get into a kind of morass which is going to be difficult to get pulled out of. So, and Jerry may want to speak to this issue as well at some stage. So these are the two issues in front of us. I want to open to questions now, please. Not questions to me, questions to the panel. There's a roving microphone, and I see we have our first question over there.
Yeah, so my question is, given the reputation that GIA has in the industry, why aren't majority of the diamonds being GIA certified, or why is it because of volume or the cost that people are not giving the diamonds to GIA for you know, review? And
I think I would just answer that obviously we have a large volume that comes through our labs on an annual basis, but I believe that the consumer drives the request for grading reports, and you know, certain retailers carry certain grading reports within their portfolio. They sell those to retailers. Retailers sell those to the consumers. GIA does not wish, as I said earlier, to be the only lab standing. That's not healthy. Not healthy for the industry, and it's not healthy for GIA. So, you know, great competition makes people better, makes companies and organizations better. We wouldn't want to be the only grading lab grading every single diamond out there. As I mentioned earlier, I think each lab has a niche, and as long as the grading standards are all agreed upon and people are using the same terminology, there are different niches. EGL originally came about for the SI3 grading niche. GIA's position on SI3 at this time relates back to our historical position that if it had an I-visible inclusion, it was graded an I1. Anything higher than that was not. I'm not a proponent of SI3. I don't think you will find much of the executive leadership team at GIA embracing SI3 as a grade. I don't believe that market forces should be actually having us change our position on something. I do believe that market forces will determine the pricing. With total transparency, there is a different price because there is a different product. You will find a high I1 will probably trade at a different price than a low I1. A high SI2 is going to trade very differently than a very low SI2 that could borderline on an I1. So that would be our position at this time, and I would envisage that moving forward.
Yeah. First of all, it would be ridiculous to change a system that's been accepted by the industry. If anything is going to cause lack of confidence in diamonds, it would be to add a new grade to an established system. So that's number one.
Thank you, Joe.
A. B. The grading of a diamond really should not have anything to do with the cost of what that product is. So in other words, you have it's just like Susan said, if a diamond is a low or a high, the industry who's buying and trading in them needs to look at the diamond. So if it's a low, they'll know if it's a low SI2 or a high I1, and then that's the grading of diamonds really should have nothing to do with the value or the cost of the diamond, in my opinion.
I have a couple comments. The SI3 grade, Tom Tashi invented it, and I think Gary Roskin was involved back in the 70s. It was invented because of this problem with SI2 to I1 pricing. The industry, this is in the 70s now, and it's 45 years later, and the industry hasn't solved the problem of the difference, the great disparity in price between SI2 and I1. So I don't think the industry is going to be able to solve it. I personally believe one of the functions of a laboratory is to try to create products that help people sell diamonds, and as well as report factually the information about the quality and cut of diamonds. With that in mind, 2 years ago, AGS came out. We had one more grade than GIA in our scale. We added an SI2 7 grade. It's very similar to an SI3. I'm really amazed that the industry hasn't really grabbed onto that one because, you know, when you look at the world marketing of diamonds in the world, say, what about all the big chains? You know, the big chain stores. You know, a lot of those chain stores, they might have their good might be an I2, and their better might be an I1, and their best might be an SI2. You know, if you are a fine jeweler, you're probably not in that market area. However, adding an SI2 7 grade puts you into a little area. It's kind of very similar, like high I1, low SI2. There's and the perception of that quality is higher in consumers' minds if they see that grade. So why not do that? Well, we did that, and it's our attempt to try to ameliorate a problem that our own industry hasn't been able to solve from a pricing standpoint. I had other comments, but I forgot them already. So maybe if you let me get back in with another comment later, I'll be happy if I remember it. Thanks.
Dries wanted to say something. Thanks. One second. Let's just. Dries wanted to speak to that point, and then we'll.
Yes. I follow my colleague certainly on the discussion, and if I just took the rules of the IDC which we follow, and it is a clear distinction between what is SI1, SI2, and what we call piqué, or included for the terminology of GIA, and we clearly define piqué as, and I will quote unquote, where the internal characteristics can be hardly found with the naked eye. And I think making anything in between that is fooling the customers, because a customer, and I think it has also a reason, a customer has a ring and he cannot find anything anymore with the naked eye. And I think that's a distinction we also own to the final consumer.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Excuse me?
I apologize. Apologies. And I respect, by the way, we don't use SI3 at Venus, but I'm looking at it from the retailer side, and I'm not a retailer, but a lot of retailers are asking me this question. If the retailers are basically saying there's a niche for this, and there's a need for it, and there is a clean eye one, why would we basically say, we are the ones who set the standards, the laboratories are the ones who set the standards, we follow it. So why would a laboratory then not actually think about potentially looking at the definitions that have been set many, many years ago, and perhaps revisiting that definition and creating a standard that the retail industry that sells into the consumer can be much more effective in being able to explain that clean eye one to the consumer rather than not doing that? I'm just curious, because I have to answer the retailers when they ask me this question. So,
can I just quickly respond? I was a retailer for 31 years until my current role, and I can only speak to a single store that I worked for. So I think it is all about, again, we heard a lot this morning about romance, the diamond dream, emotions. I think it's incumbent upon the retailers to be honest with their clients, and we never at Borsheims ever felt the need to refer to a stone as an SI3. Never. We would explain how the grades are, but you also have some inclusions within a stone. You get a VS2 emerald cut. It's not always an eye-clean stone. So whereabouts are you putting the parameters? And eye-clean becomes a very slippery slope depending on your eyesight. So your 20/20 eyesight when you're 18 years old is not the same eyesight, regrettably, that I now have at 55. Yeah. There are different, I think eye-clean, I am not a proponent of SI3. I think that as a retailer, you have an obligation to romance the stone, do not sell on grades. I am fortunate that I have always been a great proponent of GIA. They educated me in 1980. They enabled me to get the great job I got at Borsheims. And the key is the journey diamond story is so incredible. And people get lost in grading reports. Retailers need to get back to explaining, wow, where else can you walk into a store and buy a product that is 1 billion years old and get to wear it every day? I don't know of another product that's out there. Quit with the SI2 or the SI1 or the VS2, because if you can tell the journey story, and it is one of the most remarkable stories ever. These diamonds form 200 miles in the earth, thrust to the surface of a volcano. Go visit a diamond mine. Go to Rio Tinto's booth here and sit with their virtual reality show of being in a diamond mine and explain that to your clients. And ultimately help them understand this color grade, this clarity grade is what is the inherent characteristics of this particular stone. It does not mean it's better or worse than one or the other. Within the budget they have to spend, they have X amount of dollars, they will determine which of the 4 C's is more important to them. I think that obviously we get fixated on grades, and I think personally, and in the retail experience I have, that you need not ever go to the SI3.
There was a question waiting for a while, yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Martin Rapaport for inviting me for this program. I'm a lawyer, and I have been actually taking notes as to the issues that we are kind of facing, and I've also read through the diamond grading issues that we've come across. Just to note down a few things that I would like to share with you is we had, I think a gentleman here did point out regarding the slowdown for training and to get a grader up to the mark in terms of grading. And we had, I think Jerry did share something in terms of integrity of the grader. And we talked about 2 different scales. We're having the GIA standard scale and also the IDC standards. And we have issues in terms of consistency and in terms of a fast turnaround. Then you're having overgraded diamonds. You're having the issue of grading opinions, where you have multiple opinions coming to a grade. So there's a solution already that's existing where a technology can deliver these things within 10 minutes. If you say that a certificate with accurate grades, with proof of measurements, can deliver this in 10 minutes along with, you can name it color, the 4 C's, the light behavior, you've got the proportions, plus a fingerprinting so that you can avoid switches of the diamond. Now, not only that, the light behavior technology to give you a sense of credibility of what has been broken through in terms of the scientific breakthrough for this grading technology is that the light behavior technology was also taken to courts. And it is Sterling versus Ailes, where we have an expert testimony which talks that the light behavior is accurate and objective with the technology. And not only that, there's so much of research that's done on this technology that today it's being used for diamonds and is used by labs. It can also do other gemstones if we could, work together and, develop further scales for this.
Okay, so you're saying that there's technology that exists that could replace the human element of the grading. Is that what you?
Yes, and
I think you might find some people disagree at this stage. Yeah, but even so, such a machine doesn't really exist as far as I know. We can ask anyone on the panel. The color code is no longer.
The thing is that it depends on if you. I would probably rather invite you to the booth and see the grading technology yourself, and you could see, because this is not known to everybody. It's probably some companies and some major diamond retailers who use the technology today.
Okay, thank you.
So it's B6649. You can come down to the booth and see the machine.
Thank you very much. We're well over time, but we're going to keep going for those who can stay, and then for those who want a bit of additional information afterwards, I have some RapNet facts and figures which we traditionally give every year, but we'll save that for those who want it at the end because I don't want to keep people unnecessarily. The last few questions, and then we'll officially close, but we'll keep going for those who want to hang around.
Actually, I don't have a question. I have a couple answers, which may help. To begin with, when the slide showed the person who wants to sue somebody, and you have to have a GIA certified report. Well, GIA doesn't have a certification. They have a grading report. I am a GIA graduate. I'm not certified by GIA, but I am, however, certified by the Canadian Jewelers Association as a certified professional appraiser. And that's something different completely. There are about 64 of us in Canada, and there are a few in the United States that also belong to that particular program. So the piece of paper that was written by this unfortunately uneducated lawyer isn't worth the paper it's written on. So nobody's going to be suing anybody over that, because anybody who can read the thing that has any education will understand that that's just inaccurate. Also, regarding your comments about romancing the stone, that's all fine and good, and I agree with you that you should sell the stone. Every stone is individual, and so every stone has to be looked at individually, and every stone is priced individually. This is something we all know, or any of us that are actually doing that know, and I'm a retailer. Also, the jewelry industry has to make reports for the insurance industry, and you do need grading reports that actually are accurate and have to follow a specific format, such as GIA, for that particular industry. And we, when I mean we, mean the Canadian government and the Canadian Jewelers Association and the Insurance Bureau of Canada got together about 12 years ago, and we authored a pamphlet for the consumer as well as for the trade that indicated it was the consumers, it was a grading report and how grading reports should be done. And many of the Canadian jewelers follow this, and some of the American ones do as well. And it was written by 12 different experts in Canada. I was one of them, supposedly. And we came up with this grading system that most of the Canadian companies now follow, and I believe some of the American ones, and as well as some of the other ones around the world follow as well. So there are some answers to some of those questions for you. And if anybody wants to ask me any questions after, they may as well.
Thank you very much. Questions, anyone?
I don't have a question, but I just think there's one thing missing when it comes to laboratory grading and consistency. And what that is, and this has been something on my mind for many, many, many years. Just for the record, I worked at GIA in New York for 25 years, so I do know a little bit about diamond grading and how GIA works and how they grade. But I think what is missing is an organization with, I'll say, approved diamond grading experts that this group of owners would approve as a second or third, whatever you want to call it, opinion on controversial or diamonds that owners feel is not going in their favor, which is usually the case, it's never the other way around, that this group has approved to check these and anonymously get back to the owner or to the company, the lab that sends it to them, and you know, a final objective opinion on these stones, other than the labs checking themselves on what is basically rechecks.
That's a very interesting and concrete proposal. I think the first proposal we've heard today, which is, are the labs interested in some sort of external body which represents, I'm not sure who, the conglomeration of all the labs, the industry, I'm not sure, where you can refer grading to try and keep standards from drifting between the labs. That's a very interesting proposal. I don't know how the labs feel about that and their independence and where they go, but that would be a good step in moving towards keeping the industry standards in line with each other.
I have a feeling.
I have a feeling too.
How many people in this room would like the government to take care of this problem for us? That's all I have.
Well, that's exactly what I'm suggesting we should, but anyway. Anyone from the panel want to respond?
Pardon me? No, not NSIT. Some small group of people that turns into a huge bureaucracy at the cost of billions of dollars. I was trying to be facetious, but I'm pretty bad at it.
Well, sir, I appreciate your question, but I think at this hour I wanted to sum up why I'm here today. As a retailer or as an individual that grew up in the jewelry industry, I think the reason why we're here today is to recognize how do we enjoy the luxury of our business with the money that's involved. How do we do what we enjoy on the consumer end, selling to the consumer, let's face it, without getting in legal trouble, right? So when I obtained my real estate license, my instructor said, well, we're not here to teach you how to sell a home. We're here to let you into the industry without getting into legal trouble. And that's how you get your real estate license. It's to teach you how to move expensive properties, expensive purchases that the consumers make, aside from their wedding ring, their car, their home. These are these big, monumental, milestone purchases. And if we move them in the wrong direction, if they feel deceived, if they don't feel that they can trust you, we as jewelers or we as real estate agents don't have a job. We can get in legal trouble, we can be sued. You, on the panelist side, sitting there, I truly respect, because you create different brands. So why would a jeweler choose to represent GIA branded diamonds or AGS branded diamonds? I treat them as a brand, and I allow the consumer to choose which one you'd like to have on your hand. So in that respect, it doesn't make an argument to, well, is it a GIA SI2 or an AGS I1? we eliminate that by saying, do you choose to drive a Cadillac? Do you choose to drive a Lexus? All beautiful vehicles, you choose what you like to see. But why are we here today? How can we sell different branded, graded diamonds without becoming in legal trouble? How can we protect ourselves? And that's why we have these certificates or grading reports, so that the consumer can make the decision. But when they leave your store making that $20,000 purchase, if they go to another jeweler and that other jeweler has a different opinion, and he might become more glorified as a salesperson to earn their trust, that same consumer's trust, and then they say, well, Wendy, how come this jeweler now says this is something different? You two are both GIA graduates. Why does he have a difference of opinion? And if we do not, as jewelers, sell ourselves or have a good way of explaining it, how do we get ourselves from legal trouble, from being sued? If we don't give an answer that can satisfy the client, how can we save ourselves? And this is something that, while you have different brands, it's getting us in trouble because the market's confused and they're asking good, educated questions that now as retailers we're responsible in answering without getting in trouble. Did I make a question or a point?
Both. Nicely said. I have a solution, by the way, but I don't think people have enough time to listen to it. So, but I don't have anything to do the rest of the day. If you want to hang out, I'll be here after a bathroom break, and we can sit down and talk. Because I do know the solution to the problem.
It's subjective, but you can't just say subjective. It's somewhat subjective. You have a standard. There is a standard. We know that. The industry has adopted it. So, Martin, by saying subjective, I would say half a grade.
Well, let's say it's a grade. Would everybody agree, like, for example, if we said in the trade, and we were in the trade, if we said, hey, your day, but if we said, okay, if a guy sells a diamond to somebody, and he calls it an F, says the GIA, it comes back an H, the seller should take the diamond back to a full week. Do you guys think that would be a fair way for the trade to operate? Careful when they sell a diamond. They're looking. What do you guys think? What do the analysts think?
I think you can make it happen, Martin.
He said he thinks Martin can make it happen.
I can't say the official, like I said before, the trade policy that will be coming out from the World Federation of Diamond Bourses, but I will say the discussion is centering around one color. That's takes into account the fact that as much as we like diamond grading to be a science, there is an art intrinsic to it, determining the different colors and the overtones. So that is really where the discussion is centering.
So it's the jury we're saying subjective within one grade. Right. So there is a standard. If you move a little bit to the right,
It's called a tolerance.
that's a tolerance. Exactly.
Okay, we're well over time. I'm going to have to call it. This is the last question here, and then I'm sure some of the panelists will be around for anybody who wants to talk with them once the conference is officially closed.
Susan, you guys have retail when?
Excuse me?
When did you give up retail?
December 2013.
Recently?
December 31st.
Retail has changed drastically in the last couple of years. People are not buying stones, they're buying paper. People are not looking at stones anymore. They're coming with details. I want this angle, I want this table size, I want this depth percentage. The romancing of stones is over, I'm afraid to say, and I'm in the retail end of it.
I beg to differ, because I believe that it is incumbent upon the retailer to bring the emotion back. We had exactly the same. We had printouts from Blue Nile since the day Blue Nile began. They walked in and they said, this is what I want. It's incumbent upon the retailer, if they want the sale, and that's the desire, you want the sale, to educate the client and help them understand what it is they're buying. Most young folks looking for an engagement ring are going on the internet to research.
Yeah.
They are coming into your store because they're not comfortable clicking and buying. They've walked in. If they didn't feel otherwise, they would have bought online.
They come into my store with details. You know, I'm looking for a stone. It's got to have a 58 table. It's got to have a 61.4 depth. What have you got? And if you haven't got one, goodbye, Charlie. Off to the next guy.
But do you sit with them and educate them?
I do my best trying to educate them, but they've read the details, and this is what they want, and you cannot change their mind. And there might be other retailers here today. Maybe they can back me up on this or not. I don't know. But this is the experience I have.
We had a different experience because we did take the time to sit with them and help them understand that visually they could not tell the difference between a 54 and a 55% table.
We know that as professionals, but they don't.
But you then pull out stones and show them the difference. You show them a 60 table, and you show them a 54 table, and you show them a 66 table, and you help them see visually. That's what they've come to you to see. They've come to actually feel and touch and see that stone.
But, you know, we used to be the professionals, but now the girl that's getting engaged, her girlfriend who bought a stone 2 years ago is now the professional. And my girlfriend says that I have to buy the stone because then my boyfriend, it's become very different, the retail industry, I'm afraid to say. And I'm right in the middle of it in Los Angeles.
You know, people have information, the same as people know about blood pressure, cholesterol. You know, that's information, those are some numbers. But you go to a doctor because a doctor has professional knowledge and experience to understand the whole person, all of you, and that you're not, your health isn't determined only by your blood pressure and your cholesterol and those numbers. And so to be able to take back, you know, control as the professional to say, that's great, you got information on the internet, and that's wonderful that this purchase means enough to you that you went and did that homework. However, let me help you understand. And you use your education and you use what you know that is so much more complicated than the numbers that are on the report. You know, it's like Carfax. It's something that people use to be assured about a car not being in accidents and so forth. But there's still a lot more to, you know, are there burn holes in the upholstery and those kinds of things you have to see.
I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But you know the internet only tells the truth. You know that.
But there's a reason why that consumer came into your retail store with that information, and it is exactly what was said earlier. And that reason is because they still don't get it and don't trust what's on the internet. So when they come in and they say, I want a 58 table and I want the crown angle to be this, and the girdle can't be thick, it has to be thin, and you know, all of the information that they give, personally, if it was me, I don't do retail in your expertise and capabilities, but when friends come and they have the exact same things, there's a website online that you can put in the angles and all the different parameters, and then it tells you if the stone is shiny enough or not. I'm serious, and you know, a friend of mine came and asked me, you know, these parameters that you're telling me that I should get this stone, I don't think it's going to shine as well. So, you know, for me, I literally asked them, what are you looking for? I want something that will be beautiful on my wife's hand, and I want people to be able to recognize it and see it. Okay, listen, I'm going to show you 5 stones, and you tell me what the difference between these 5 stones are. And once you show it to them and you actually go through the whole process with them, and I'm sure you do this, by the way, you'll see that they start warming up to you and they start putting the paper away. Because that's the most important thing. You're no longer, yes, they are looking at it from a paper's perspective at the beginning because that's all they have, that's all they know. But our job, or the retailer's job, is to be able to sit there and really ask the important questions. Why? What is important to you? What do you want? How do you want this to be? And then let me show you something that either fits in your criteria, or when you're purchasing it, you would be absolutely ecstatic with it.
Okay, I want to.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to cut it here, and just to quickly sum up what we've discussed. And it's a very interesting conclusion that we've reached, because we seem to reach it at the end of every grading conference, which is don't sell the certificate, the grading report, sell the diamond dream. You know, that we reach that at the end of every grading conference, which is, you know, these pieces of paper are a help, they're important, but that's not what you're selling. You're not pushing paper, you're selling diamonds and diamonds dream. The second thing that we seem to have all agreed here on with consensus is that there is a standard. The GIA standard is the standard that everybody should be following. HRD has following a different standard with similar results, which is also very important. That you know, even if you come at it from a different angle, the results are pretty similar, and that we all agree, as good retailers, as good laboratories, and as good manufacturers and dealers, that these standards are important for us to keep confidence and to keep the business moving. You know, even if you look on RapNet, where we have 1.5 million diamonds every day for sale, so we see a lot of diamonds going through the system. When we took off EGL as a laboratory on RapNet, and we said you can put on those diamonds, but they're no longer considered graded, they're just considered ungraded. The price of ungraded diamonds on RapNet dropped by about, I think, 10 or 15%. In other words, certain labs were discounted to such an extent that they were selling for cheaper than ungraded diamonds. And this kind of thing is important, because there is a certain discount built into the different laboratories based on what perceived grading standards are at the different laboratories. And even when we did some sort of unscientific blind test a few years ago and sent diamonds around to a few labs, you know, the results were pretty, you know, at least amongst the labs that we used that are on this panel, were pretty much of a muchness. There wasn't a huge, what should I call it, tolerance. There wasn't a huge difference between the color clarities. So, but even so, there's still a price differential built into those labs for their perceived brand value. So we have a grading standard that everyone agrees to. We have a sell the diamond, don't sell the certificate. And we have a very important role to play, all of us here, in keeping consumer confidence. You don't want to end up with a class action lawsuit waking us up. We need to keep ourselves self-policing. So with that, I want to thank everybody, especially the panel. And for those who can hang around afterwards for questions, that would be great. And with that, I officially close the conference. Thank you very much, everybody.